The rain was coming down in silver sheets, the kind of storm that made even the bravest drivers hesitate on the road. It was late evening, the streetlights flickering weakly against the downpour, when Alexander Grant's black luxury car slowed in front of his estate. He had just returned from yet another business meeting, another deal signed, another few million added to his already mountainous fortune. Success was his shadow, always at his heels, but loneliness trailed close behind. He was used to arriving home to a sprawling mansion that echoed with emptiness. No wife. No children. Just wealth. As his driver pulled up the long driveway, the headlights cut across a sight that made Alexander's heart lurch. Two figures lay crumpled on the wet pavement near the massive iron gates. An elderly couple, frail, soaked through, their faces pale as porcelain, looked as if the rain itself had defeated them. The woman's thin hand was still clutching the man's sleeve as though refusing to let him go even as they both lay unconscious. "Stop!" Alexander's voice cracked, the sharp command startling even himself. He threw the car door open before it had even fully stopped, sprinting into the rain. The icy water plastered his designer suit to his skin, but he hardly noticed. He knelt beside the couple, his fingers trembling as he checked for pulses. Both were alive, though weak. Labored breaths rattled from the man, while the woman barely stirred at all. "Help me!" Alexander shouted at the driver, who rushed out with an umbrella. "We need to get them inside. Now!" Minutes later, the mansion's opulent foyer, lined with marble floors and golden chandeliers, was transformed into an emergency room of sorts. Towels, blankets, and hot tea were rushed out by the startled staff. Alexander, who had never touched another person in such desperation, found himself kneeling on the floor beside the strangers, holding their hands, whispering, "Stay with me. You're safe now." The old man stirred first. His eyes, clouded with age, blinked open. He looked around the luxurious room as if he had landed in another world. "Mary," he whispered, reaching weakly for his wife. Alexander gently guided their hands together. "She's here," Alexander said softly. "She's going to be all right." For a long moment, Alexander just stared at them, this fragile pair who had nearly died outside his gate, unnoticed by the world. Something inside him shifted, something that had been buried under layers of money, power, and pride. The doctor arrived not long after, summoned urgently by Alexander's personal assistant. The couple were treated for exhaustion, dehydration, and mild hypothermia. They would recover, the doctor assured, but they needed rest and nourishment. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He paced the wide halls of his mansion, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. The image of the couple lying in the storm replayed in his mind. How many others like them were out there right now, invisible to men like him? He thought about how easily he could have driven past, how easily they might have been gone forever. When morning came, Alexander insisted on visiting them. He found the elderly couple sitting by the fire in one of the guest rooms, wrapped in blankets. The woman's name was Mary, the man's John. They looked small against the oversized furniture, their eyes carrying years of hardship. "Thank you," John rasped, his voice weak but steady. "We owe you our lives." Alexander shook his head. "No, sir. If anything, I owe you. Seeing you there, it woke something in me." He hesitated, then asked, "How did you end up outside my gates, in the middle of the night?" Mary's eyes filled with tears. "We had nowhere else to go," she whispered. "Our son, he used to live in this city. We came hoping to find him, but," her voice broke. "He's gone. We lost everything. Our home, our savings. We thought maybe someone would help, but the doors kept closing." John added, his jaw trembling, "We walked until we couldn't anymore. When we saw the lights of this house, we thought, maybe here." Alexander felt the weight of their words press down on him. For years, he had built walls around himself, believing money was protection, that needing no one was strength. But now, Staring at these two broken souls who had only each other, he realized how empty his fortress of wealth really was. Over the next few days, Alexander ensured they received the best care. But he didn't stop there. He began sitting with them, asking about their lives. He learned that John had once been a carpenter, crafting furniture with his hands until arthritis stole his strength. Mary had been a teacher, beloved by her students, until retirement forced her into silence. They had given their lives to others, but when their health declined and bills mounted, the world turned its back. One evening, as the three of them shared dinner at a long dining table that Alexander usually occupied alone, Mary smiled faintly. "You know, Mr. Grant, this is the first time in years we've sat at a table with someone who looked us in the eye." Those words pierced Alexander's heart deeper than any boardroom negotiation ever had. That night, he made a decision. The next morning, Alexander instructed his staff to find temporary housing for John and Mary. He paid their medical expenses and set up a fund to ensure they'd never worry about money again. But he didn't stop there. For the first time, Alexander walked beyond his own gates. He visited shelters, soup kitchens, and nursing homes. What he saw stunned him: countless faces lined with struggle, people invisible to the world, just as John and Mary had been. Slowly, the millionaire who once measured success in profit margins began to measure it in lives touched. He started a foundation, the Second Chance Initiative, to provide shelter, food, and dignity to the forgotten. He poured not just his money into it, but his time, his presence. Months passed, and word of his transformation spread. Business partners were baffled. Some mocked him, saying he was wasting his fortune. But Alexander didn't care. For the first time, he felt alive. Every time he saw a weary face light up with hope, he understood that wealth meant nothing until it was shared. John and Mary became the heart of his foundation, offering wisdom and compassion to those who came seeking help. They were no longer victims but pillars of inspiration. And Alexander, the man who once lived alone in a mansion of silence, found in them the family he never knew he needed. One evening, as they sat together on the mansion's veranda watching the sunset, John turned to Alexander. "You saved us," he said quietly. Alexander shook his head. "No, John. You saved me. That night in the rain, you gave me back my humanity." The air grew still as the last rays of the sun painted the sky. For once, Alexander didn't feel the emptiness of his home. He felt the warmth of belonging, of purpose. And as the years went by, people stopped calling him just a millionaire. They called him something far greater, a man who chose compassion over comfort, humanity over pride. The night he had found John and Mary outside his gates became the turning point not just of his life, but of countless others. Because sometimes, it takes seeing brokenness in others to heal the emptiness within ourselves. And Alexander Grant had finally learned the greatest truth of all: the measure of a life well lived is not in what you have, but in what you give.